Is it?
Well, I'm just trying to bring this back up.
Oh, the package.
Yeah.
You look for Cassie in the search, go CS.
Where's
Yeah,
the...
John there. And then at this little bar.
All right.
And just hit the letter CS. Her email come up. Shit, and Cassie, just hit that one.
There we go. Yeah.
Yes. That's what
All seconds. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the regular board meeting for the Fundy Regional Service Commission for May 23rd, 2024. We'll call the meeting to order. Let the record show that Director McKenzie is joining us virtually this morning. May I have the approval of the agenda, please? Director Rodell moved, seconded by Director Grant. Could we have, in addition to that, please, the Pro Kids Next Steps discussion? Would you both agree to adding that to the agenda? Director Rodell, you okay with that? All those in favor? Motion carried. Approval of the minutes of April 25th, 2024. I have a mover on that, please. Director Grant, seconder, Director Doucette. All those in favor? Motion carried unanimously. Approval of minutes from May 7th, 2024. Mover on that, please. Director Doucette, seconded by Director Bedford. All those in favor? Motion carried unanimously. Looking for a disclosure of conflict of interest. Seeing there are none. We will go to item number 3, the CEO with a verbal update.
Great. Through Chair O'Hara to members of the board, I have a few items to update you on. First, I wanted to give you a quick update on the EIA. As part of the correspondence that you've received in the package, we have received conditional approval from the Department of Environment and Local Government. We do not intend to take any action on that today. The next step to remind the board is to develop a business plan on this. This will take some time. We intend to come in June and provide the board with context on what we heard through the entire process of the EIA. In turn, what the conditions signify. We just got this last week, so we haven't kind of dove into that specifically. And then the parameters and assumptions around how we'll develop the business case. And the objective is by July, we would come with a business case. We also will be consulting with CMEI as part of this exercise, a very important stakeholder. So we will be connecting with them as part of this. So just want to make sure you're all aware that today we have no action to be taken. It's really just a receive and file of that item once we get to it in the correspondence. The other item I wanted to share is that we did submit an application to the Rural Transit Solutions Fund last Friday, May 17th. This is an interesting application in that we did not want to step on the toes of any local government's applications or local communities' applications as you're also eligible to apply. So the differentiation is that several more local communities are seeking specific routes, pain points within neighborhoods. We're looking at this more broadly around the linkages between communities and where there's opportunities with that. We've also received a preliminary approval from RDC to leverage an additional $40,000 on the $50,000 that we would receive from Transport Canada if we were successful. So we think this will be an important a win for our region if we are successful, and we'll really ultimately be expanding upon the survey that's already been generated through the Transportation Committee and expanding that out on the facets of that survey that have not tackled the data that we were looking for. The other item I wanted to share is on Regional Development Corporation. An application from the City of St. John has been submitted. It does look very positive that it would be funded. So if you recall last year, we had a $1.4 million capital budget for regional facilities. This year it's 1.5. RDC has indicated their interest to fund up to 40% of that. And I have confirmed with the city is that when they present this budget to us, when they say, here's the 1.5 million that we would like for capital for regional facilities, that is without RDC funding. So they do not assume that we're getting RDC funding if you approve that. So if RDC gives us an equivalent of 40% of $1.5 million, what happens is that those funds remain with you because we don't collect your capital dollars until the project is complete. So it basically creates a savings for you, but it also creates a venue or space to have a discussion on whether those funds could or should be used for anything else related to the FRSC's regional facilities. In the past, we've used it, as if you recall, for the Aquatic Center Enhancement Study, as well as more recently with the swim blocks. So I will keep you posted on that. I suspect we'll find out in the next coming weeks. That would be another big win for our organization. I also wanted to share with you future board meetings. So last year, if you recall, we did what I think we dubbed the carousel of meetings, where we would go around the region and have meetings across different communities. One notable was, of course, the lobster rolls in St. Martin's, but I don't want to bring it up because I don't want to create a competition of hosting and hospitality. But anyhow, we missed two. One was with the rural district, and one was at Hampton. And we for different reasons, we didn't decide to do that earlier this year, but we think it's the right time to do it. So we are planning to have our June meeting in Browns Flat within the rural district, which would be a great opportunity to get all our members into that region of or that community of our region. And then in July, we intend to go to Hampton. Fingers crossed, the vision is that by August, our office will be built and ready, and we will be meeting in our office in August. So you can tell me I'm wrong if that happens, but that is the plan, and I like plans. The next two, I will give a quick update, and I will pass it on to others that were involved if they have anything else to add. After our last meeting in April, on April 26th, Chair O'Hara and I had an opportunity to travel to Rishabhakto for a meeting in what was a very rustic setting to participate with the municipal associations, the Association francophone des municipalités du New Brunswick, as well as the Union of Municipalities of New Brunswick. And really what the objective here was, those two associations didn't really know how to manage the RSC network. You know, are they part of the associations? Do they get involved? They are also struggling because some of their members are saying, yeah, things are going okay with RSCs. Yeah, they're okay. I don't mind if they show up to these meetings or if they're involved a little bit. Where other members are saying, keep them away. I'm not having a good experience and I don't want them around the associations. So they're conflicted. Also, RSCs sometimes are asked by the provincial government, what's your thoughts on this? You know, we're working on something. What's your thoughts? Well, they do the same thing to the municipal associations. And there's a natural conflict point, which is that the members of the association and the members of the RSCs are the same. So there could be a scenario that, you know, CEO Phil Willett is saying, well, I think this seems pretty reasonable. And then a representative from the UNMB saying, I really don't like that. But we have the same members. So your members are being represented two different ways according to two different organizations. So we had a lot to discuss. It was a good opportunity. And I think ultimately it ended with an acknowledgement that there's real good benefit to start sharing more information, to seeing greater alignment between the RSCs and the associations, and that there'll be more concerted efforts to see what that integration looks like. There isn't, you know, we didn't determine that there'll be a new affiliate membership for the associations, for the RSCs. But I think it did kind of create a venue for discussion. I'll pass it to Chair O'Hara if there's anything else she'd add. She participated.
Thank you, Phil. I think it was fairly clear that that there were some alignments that came out of those meetings and some appreciation on the part of everyone attending that that we do have the lobby support of UMNB, and I think we have to continue moving forward with this. And when we can simplify and align and in working together, I think we can look at the differences that different communities were expressing. Some of the challenges that they have in some parts of the province, we do not experience in this part of the province. And it's to ensure that everybody's needs are being served. So I think it's a stronger voice when we are working together and we can recognize the issues that others are having. So I found it beneficial. I found that it was nice and interesting to hear what some of the issues were from around the province, in the northern part of the province. And certainly look forward to future engagements and seeing people at the table who, as Phil was saying, didn't quite know what the other hand was doing or didn't quite know what their neighbors were doing in other regions. So I think it was beneficial, and certainly appreciate the fact that that Dan and the president of UNB were available as well. Phil.
Great. The last item is I was able to attend on May 10th a working group session to kick off what will be a working group for fiscal reform with the province. Director Merrifield was there as well, and I will ask her at the end of my quick update if she has anything else to add. It was a very early stage meeting, I would call it. Really an opportunity to clarify assumptions and expectations for the working group. The working group was not selected by myself or by Director Merrifield. The province defined who was on that particular group. For myself, the RSCs were given 2 seats for CEOs, and I was elected amongst those members of CEOs to participate in the working group. It was very initial in terms of expectations and values of the session. I would say that a theme was that all the participants present were very interested in discussing how the working group will expand the discussion to all other stakeholders across the province. It was a common theme. It was a very short meeting, but one note that I will make is that the province appears to have prioritize this centrally. And what I mean by that is that there were deputies from a variety of departments present. The clerk was present. And I've seen this a couple times in my career. And what this typically means is that it's central. So the Premier's office would say to the administration of the government of New Brunswick, you need to be present to make this work. So, you have finance there, you have the clerk's office, you have DTI, you have ONB, you had RDC, all the departments that would have relevancy to the fiscal reform agenda were there. And that is promising from an administrative standpoint. It's not an ELG run event. It is a province run event. And that means that if there are ideas that come up that are not just restricted to a new grant within ELG, that it's related to the tax system or it's related to other revenue sources of the province, there's really an opportunity to flex into other departments for that. So that was an optimistic piece of it. And certainly from my standpoint, I will keep you posted on this as this progresses. With that, I'll pass it on to Director Merrifield if she has anything else to add.
Yeah, thank you. So Phil is right in that everybody that was around the table needed to be around the table. So we had all of the assistant deputy ministers and deputy ministers of all the relevant departments, as well as senior staff. So that was very good. I was there as part of the fiscal reform working group as a representative of UMNB. I've been appointed to that group. That's why I was there. One of the first things we did was we worked to define the problem statement. So we were given a problem statement and we were to provide input on that. So we're still waiting for some of those reports to come back in terms of what that's going to look like based on our input. So basically the problem statement is, do local governments have access to adequate financial resources to deliver the services mandated and desired by citizens in the community? So we had the ability to provide input on that. We also had input on what the intended proposed end state was going to be. And so we were given like a series of statements and asked to provide input on those. And so again, we've done that, and we're waiting to see how that input will be received and integrated and in the process. The high level timeline and deliverables. By the end of 2024, they're going to have a basic plan that will be delivered to government for input on the options. Q1 2025, they're expecting recommendations from government, and Q2 of 2025, they're looking at an implementation plan. So this is all post-election. So, whether the process will survive political change remains to be seen. It's good that the process has started, but I would like to see a little bit more urgency. And one of the issues and one of the principles that I spoke of and will continue to speak of is that local governments are not stakeholders in this. We should be considered equal partners, not even external partners. So we will continue to advocate from a UMNB perspective that local governments have a seat at the table at all levels of negotiation, including what they would consider internal planning. So, thank you.
Thank you, Director Merrifield. Very interesting, and I guess it's the commitment that we're all looking for is, we need the funding, we need to have the government support what the mandates are for each of these communities, and we look forward to your continued hard work on this, so thank you for that. With yours? Or with
I'm all done.
Okay.
No,
No, I didn't think so. So item number 4, the consent items, building and planning monthly report, and we are looking for a receive and file on that, please, unless you have any comments or questions. Moved by Director Doucette, seconded by Director Bedford. On the question, all those in favor? Motion carried unanimously. And the recent funding overview, also looking for a receive and file on that, unless there is a question on that. Moved to receive and file by Director Ray Riddell and seconded by Director Bedford. All those in favor? Motion carried unanimously. Standing items, committee agendas. Yeah.
Receive and file.
Do I have a motion for receive and file on? Moved by Director Grant, seconded by Director Riddell. All those in favor? Motion carried unanimously. John, you're able to hear us all right?
Yeah, I can hear it's in and out a bit, and I can't see much, but it's all right. I guess my only question on item 5.1 is what is the point of that? It's just for information.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And item number 6. What's that? I will go to Phil.
Great. Through Chair O'Hara to members of the board, we are doing our annual general meeting. It is a requirement of the FRSC to host one each year. And for the next 5 items, they're all items that would fall under the annual general meeting. The first one is the annual report. If you recall, we'd reported this last meeting, that we were going to come in with a presentation, and we have that completed, and Brenda will be doing that. But before she does, I want to just make a quick comment to the board on a theme that I believe is throughout the annual report. And you've heard this from me before, but individuals, you as individuals, as mayors, as chair of the rural district, you never really had a choice about being part of this committee or this board. Nor did you have a choice on the mandates that were given to us. Nor did you have much choice on the matter of the costs that were going to be associated with it. Those are all things that were the reality of provincial local governance reform. However, you did have a choice on how to respond to it. And the annual report identifies a variety of achievements and accomplishments that the FRSC achieved last year in 2023. And the vision that this board provided, the platform that it provided for that is there. And that's really where the year started in 2023, was the board's commitment to making the best of what we have as a mandate. And this is year 1 of this new mandate, and an acknowledgement of the progress that has been made and the work that we still have to do. So I wanted to thank all of you for your leadership and perseverance through what was a real transformational and transitional year for the Commission. And with that, I will pass it on to Brenda McCallum, who will run through our annual report presentation.
And is,
Welcome, Brenda, and
Yeah, thank
you're all set to go.
okay, and is somebody, or flipping through? You can do it, okay. Thank you. I have nothing to flip through from here, other than my pages, yeah. Yes, yeah. Somebody over there. Well, thank you very much. And as you've seen in the kit, this is a lengthy report. Some of it we will move through quickly, but to Phil's point, it is an outline of the achievements. So just to put things in context, this is the first annual report with our expanded mandates. And we spent much of 2023 last year developing that regional strategy, and then from the regional strategy, our annual work plan for 2024. We also said in that regional strategy that we would be developing KPIs. Those KPIs are to measure the action items that are outlined in the regional strategy. Those action items begin in 2024, since we adopted the regional strategy in August of 23. So the KPIs are not in this year's annual report, just because some of those action items were only just beginning at the end of 23. And finally, this is a summary. The full report will come to you in June at the June meeting, where you'll receive a hard copy, and we'll have an online copy as well. Go on to the next one. So the vision and values, you're very familiar with the vision, values, and mandate, since this was part of the regional strategy, but and it came from you along with our stakeholders. But you'll see as we go through last year, those values of trust, collaboration, innovation, transparency, continuous improvement, and financial responsibility will be echoing throughout this annual report. So the funding from you, this is the funding into our 7.6 million budget. So this is broken up by the communities and your contribution in there. And to the next slide, Phil, please. And then how it is spent. So 95% of your contributions go to the 3 largest mandates of regional facilities, solid waste, and economic development and tourism promotion. I will note that the solid waste, the way it's represented here, is your member fees, so that does not include the other 2/3 of the solid waste budget, which would come through the non-residential tip fees. That orange sliver at the top is the community planning and building inspection, which is 4% of the budget and is paid for by the 2 members receiving that service as well. Community development, regional transportation, and public safety are all less than 1% in there. So the key highlights that we will go through, first of all, just again, acknowledging, as Phil mentioned at the beginning, the time and the demands that come from this board and from the CAOs and the rural district manager. We also have 46 committee member roles that are also integral to each of the mandates. We adopted the first ever regional strategy, took up much of 2023, I'm sure you will remember. And then our annual work plan, we hit 85% of all the action items in 2023. Again, a great achievement. And those final items have been rolled into 2024. We've worked on engagement and communication across FRSC with the CAOs and the RDM as well, and then forged new working relationships. We've accessed a fair amount, we'll get into that at the end of this report, about the access to the funding from the provincial government, and then the amount of advocacy that was done. This next section, we're going to go through each of the mandates. Some of this material has been drawn from that regional strategy, and then we'll look at the highlights from each of the committee mandates as well. Community planning and building inspection. This is one committee that was in existence. So this is PRAC, and so this is ongoing work, and they've been established since 2013. And this is for the service to the Fundy St. Martin's and Fundy Rural District as well. So they held 7 meetings in 2023. And the representatives are all from those 2 communities as well. So some of the highlights from community planning and building inspection: they completed 2 housing needs assessments, applied to CMHC for the Housing Accelerator Fund for the 2 members, and then initiated the rural plan for Fundy St. Martin's. All major steps forward. Then the results from the building inspection. Here are the building permits in 2023. These are all new boundaries. So again, we're setting a foundational year here in 2023. And we'll start comparing that over time as we move forward, since those boundaries have changed overall, but with a total of 125 building permits that were completed in 23. Regional public safety. This is our largest committee. It's led by Chair Bedford, along with the Vice Chair of Director Merrifield. And this committee is unique in that it comprises members from fire, police, and EMO, all with representation across the region. They held 3 meetings in 2023, and as for the highlights, there was a lot of work in orientation on the FRSC and the public safety mandate. Of course, there was input back and forth on the regional strategy, but the big piece here is this is the first time we've had representation from fire, police, and EMO sitting around the table together, and that was commented on, that this was unique in our region. Regional transportation. Another unique committee with members from this is led through with Director Merrifield as the chair, and then Councillor Mike Bigger from Quispamsis as the vice chair. But a unique committee with representations. We have public sector, people working in the public sector, in transportation, with staff members from those areas. Then we have public members who have different views and take usage of different types of transportation sitting on the committee as well. Some of the key highlights for the Transportation Committee. Again, lots of orientation and feedback on the regional strategy. The parameters were set for the Train Traffic and Safety Committee, and then initiated a brand new partnership with UMB St. John in the development of a survey on regional transportation. Community development. With the broad mandate across community development, this committee is led by Director Mackenzie, and the vice chair is Mary Schreier from Quispamsis. We held 4 meetings in 2023, and the committee, again, a diverse mix of members, local leaders from all the various mandates that community development covers, including with representation for research from UMBSJ as well. Some of the highlights. We initiated work on the needs assessment, asset mapping, and data research that will take up much of 2024 for that committee. The Urban Rural Rides program was restructured and standardized, and then we are constantly working and building new relationships with our various nonprofit sectors across the region. Regional facilities. Director Grant, along with the vice chair is Director Doucette. This committee held 6 meetings in 2023 and is made up of the CAOs and the regional and the rural district manager in the area. We'll flip to the highlights. 2 major studies were done, the arena needs assessment and initiated work on the aquatic center enhancement study. They also supported access to the to RDC for capital expenditures, which was touched on earlier today as well. Economic development and tourism promotion, of course, maintain the collaborative relationship with Envision St. John, and I'll get you to flip on to the highlights. Again, this is additional funding was accessed through the Department of Health, and as well, there was onboarding for the master service agreement from the Fundy Rural District and Fundy St. Martin's. Move on to solid waste, and I think we'll jump right into the solid waste highlights if we can for 23. So work was initiated last year on the EIA, which will continue to impact this for the next 22 years if that is accepted. The printed paper and packaging was introduced by Recycle New Brunswick, and we began negotiations for that program, which again will have a major financial impact on the budget moving forward. Landfill odors, and there was a plan set in place to continue to track landfill odors and to work with stakeholders. And as well, 21 new gas wells were installed at the landfill. In solid waste and diversion. So this graph represents the material coming into Crane Mountain Landfill. You can see here that between what we call ICI garbage and residential garbage, there's quite a difference. And 2/3 of the waste, when we are looking just at garbage going into the landfill, is 2/3 of the waste comes from the non-residential sector as well. In looking down into residential diversion, so this is just what's coming from each of your communities, that we made a huge step forward last year. So if we looked at 2022, the diversion in the areas of compost and recycling made up 29% of what entered the landfill. And this year that moved to 37%. That increase came from the City of St. John's new restriction on waste. And it's one of our strategies moving forward as well, to look at it across the region. So you can see the impact that has had on diversion. So the final one, not really a mandate area, but it is the corporate administration that stretches across the organization. So administration, governance, and collaboration. Flip on to the highlights. So some of the highlights from this area in the budget: accessed $2.5 million in government funding. As well, for 2024, the member fees have decreased by 8% over 2023. As we look at communication, there's monthly interactions and building that trust as we move across, and the interactions between the CAOs and the FRSC, and as well 20 different presentations what came out to member councils. Under advocacy, again, that continuous, let's look at the sustainable funding for our members and the financial challenges that are faced by our communities. Switch on to the government funding. Here's a full list of that $2.5 million funding that was accessed over 2023 to help offset the budget or to deliver new programs. And then to represent this, we've taken that same graph from the beginning and put in that impact of 19% of the budget came from those additional funds, and the impact that had on the funding that is paid into by your community. So when we think about continuous improvement, and as we look over the past year, we know that there's still work to be done here. And one of that is communication. We are looking to expand our communication to build on the awareness of what we are doing and our mandates with our partners and stakeholders. We're looking to increase that information sharing from the committees. How do we do that across the board as well? Respecting your time and that of your staff. As we move forward, we recognize the demands that this is taking on all of you. And then the importance of the tangible and valuable outcomes that we do see. We've spent much of this year building on those mandates and setting the policies in place. We know we need to see some tangible outcomes. And then acknowledging at the same time and in balance with all of that we are in a state of change management and the stress that can cause as well. So with that, I'll leave it with the recommendation that's up on the...
Thank you very much, Brenda. Certainly we've come a long way since from a year ago. And I will open the floor to any comments or anything that any of the mayors or directors would like to say. And again, I thank you for a very comprehensive year-end report. Director Merrifield, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Brenda. That was a great presentation, and the annual report looks good. And you're right, we've come a really long way, and I really like how things were presented in really clear, and explainable and understandable ways via the tables and the graphs, etc. It will make it a lot easier for me to explain this to my council as well as residents in terms of what the regional, what we are doing here and where we've been and where we're going. And I know I'm a broken record on this, but I always have to highlight that 19% in government funding for our budget, over $1 million of it, I think, comes from our community funding and equalization grant, which normally would go straight to local governments in order to manage our own priorities. So as you know, that's been a funding gap that's hurt local governments at the grassroots level, even though, you know, it's assisting the Regional Services Commission in different ways. But I think it's very, very important that we always make sure to acknowledge that that funding comes at the expense of the budgets of local governments. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Merrifield, and that we need new money, that it can't be reused money or CEO Willett.
Just one observation that I think is important to reflect on after reviewing this. I see Director McKenzie has his hands up, so perhaps I'll yield to him and then I'll.
All right, Director McKenzie, and then I'll just make one comment as well on something that I had seen. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would echo everything that Mayor Merrifield said, with emphasis on that $957,000 that does come, at our cost. But I liked the report. I liked how it was laid out. It was easy to understand, and it really does show how far we've come over the last year. So certainly support the recommendations going forward.
Thank you very much. And one of the very small items that I had noticed with Envision St. John, I'm just wondering if it isn't too late, if we could include the entire name for Envision St. John as the Regional Growth Agency, just so that it is it represents the entire region.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will go to CEO Willett.
Just the point I wanted to make here is that when you look at all the different mandates, a challenge we might have is that it might be easy to compare them to each other. So you might say, oh, I heard that, Chair Grant has met 7 times or 6 times and they've done all this work. We've only met 2 times. Oh, we're falling behind. And I think what I'd like to acknowledge is that not every mandate's built equally. It doesn't require the same. So when you see public safety meeting 3 times, I don't think we need to, we don't know yet. It could be that we need to meet more, but we don't know that yet. It could mean that that's the only thing they need. That group only needs to meet 3 times a year, and that's a good, successful. We're still trying to figure out what that equation is. But absolutely, there are some with higher demands than others and with greater interest from the community, and I believe they will evolve. I think the risk for us is to try to compare them apples to apples. They're not apples to apples. And also, as you see the funding that's allocated to them, they're also not equal in terms of our budget. It's just it's an important finding, a theme that I see through the presentation, and we'll continue to adapt as we learn more about each one of the mandates.
Thank you, CEO Willett. So we are looking for a receive and file. Moved by Director Bedford, seconded by Director Doucette. On the question, all those in favor? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Brenda. It was well done. And the second motion is that we direct the FRSC to solicit interest from the FRSC members to schedule presentations starting in July 2024 with local councils on the 2023 FRSC annual report. Moved by Director Merrifield, seconded by Director Riddell. All those in favor? Motion carried unanimously. Item number 6.2, asset retirement obligation. And I will go to CEO Willett, please, for that.
Through the chair to members of the board, this is a very technical report, and we're going to do our best to try to clarify this piece. But we decided to put this in because our audit looks very different, and of all the things that are happening in our world, the new mandate, the funding, committees, annual report, regional strategy. We had another big thing that happened over the last year, which is new accounting expectations. And it places new demands on us as a public sector body to talk about asset retirement obligations. And it might not be the top item that comes to mind to you on what you want to discuss, but it's nevertheless something that we think is really important to walk you through. So we've asked our CFO, Mark Porter, to come in and give a little bit of a summary of the report that's in the package, and I'll invite Mark to the podium. Thank you, Mark.
Morning.
Welcome, Mark.
It's like Christmas for an accountant. I get to talk accounting policies to a captive audience. Yeah, when we get around to the financial statements, you'll notice there's a big change in the presentation on those statements and all the liability numbers. So for the background, CPA Canada is our national standard setting body for accounting policies. Covers financial accounting and reporting standards. So from 1997 to 2022, the accounting standard followed by our organization was PS 3270, which was solid waste landfill closure and post-closure liability, which the other landfills also followed. This standard required a landfill to estimate future expenditures related to activities required when the landfill stops accepting waste. So only those expenditures at the closure date and subsequent to that date were recorded as a liability, and it was calculated based on the percentage of waste that had been accepted into the site. So the full future cost wasn't ever included. It was only the proportion of it, net present valued back to the current year end dates. They're becoming more complicated. So our past practices were consistent with other landfills in New Brunswick, and the initial waste containment cell construction costs were capitalized, just like we'd always do. We'd pay for what we could out of operations, the rest we would borrow through provincial debentures. And the assets were capitalized to tangible capital assets. Subsequent costs of final capping and landfill gas wells were recognized as an expenditure in the year undertaken, since long-term debentures through the Capital Borrowing Board are not an option when no tangible capital asset is acquired. And that's because there's no future benefit to the asset, no service life. So that's the background to what we did in the past, which all the other landfills did in New Brunswick. The new standard is PS 3280, Asset Retirement Obligations. So it's effective January 1st, 2023. It was supposed to be January 1st, 2021, but it got delayed 2 years because of COVID. So we've all been anticipating this coming along, and at presentations for our CPA association, when we do courses, that they really don't delve into it. It's the overall concepts. And so until you actually get into it, you don't realize how much there is to it. The new standard establishes how to account for and report a liability for asset retirement obligations. Specifically, it defines which activities would be included in a liability for retirement of a tangible capital asset, establishes when to recognize and how to measure the liability, and provides the related financial statement presentation and disclosure. And I applied the standard on a modified retroactive basis as at January 1st, 2023. So the comparative numbers for 2022's financial statements are not changed. It just would have required more work to do that, and I didn't deem there to be enough benefit to do that extra work. And all the municipalities, you would have seen this coming through on your financial statements this year because you're also covered under the same section. So anything you own, like buildings, water towers, stuff like that, you have to take these costs future disposal costs into consideration. So, next page, the new accounting standard requires the calculation of an asset retirement obligation for all tangible capital assets owned or leased. And so this includes buildings and other things that we didn't include before in the closure and post-closure calculation. So in the context of the landfill, the initial construction of a waste containment cell necessitates the additional future asset retirement costs of final cell capping, leachate collection and treatment, and landfill gas collection and destruction. The new standard requires the FRSC to recognize, at the time waste is accepted into the cell, the estimated future cash flows for expenditures to retire the waste containment cell at the end of its life. Service life, sorry. So upon initial recognition of the liability for an asset retirement obligation, an organization recognizes the asset retirement cost equivalent to that by adding it to the cost of our tangible capital assets. And then it's amortized in future years to our income statement. So it really reflects how that asset value is used up in future years. And that's how we'll recognize it in the future. In previous years, we would have just expensed capping costs all in 1 year when it was done. So other significant information here for our financial statement. So the major factor in the ARO calculation at Crane Mountain is the square meters of surface area without final capping related to closed waste containment cells. At January 1st, 2023, there was an estimated 128,890 square meters of final capping, including cell number 9. After scheduled capping in 23, the remaining area is 120,690 square meters. In addition, landfill gas installation was completed to the extent of filled cells, with 11 wells drilled in or re-drilled in cells 4 to 6 and 10 new wells drilled in cells 5 to 8. Final capping had been deferred due to the location of the leachate collection pond within the landfill site footprint and the possibility of going higher on our waste cells. With the adoption of the new standard, the post-closure care period was also increased from 30 to 40 years to better reflect our duty of care for surrounding population areas. This longer care period requires higher funding balances for future cash outflows. ELG, in collaboration with the Department of Environment, are expected to review landfill closure standards over the next few years, because they basically have no standards at this point in time. So, our path forward, the liability accumulated over many years, and the liability will need to be eliminated over long term, probably a decade or longer. The 2024 budget includes a $500,000 expenditure for annual containment cell capping and $140,000 for additional asset retirement liability reduction. But significant funding is required to reduce the $6,973,000 ARO liability to a more reasonable level. There are operating changes in the next few years that will benefit the Commission. First change is the incremental revenue from sorting recyclables. And we are going to lose a little bit of revenue out of that because we won't be owning the materials to sell. That could be transferred into our special account for our asset retirement liability reduction. And if you approve going higher on the waste cells, we'll take in a whole lot of extra waste without having to pay for cell construction to hold it. Cells are already built. Once you go higher, that cost of, basically you get the same cost of building the cell, capping it, taking care of the leachate, whether you go to this height or this height. So if we can save a little bit by going higher, we'll do that. And that money there, those savings could be put into that special account to pay for the asset retirement obligation. And I had estimated that the cost was probably $17.40 per ton that we could set aside out of every additional ton that we pile up on top of the existing cells. FRSC is contacted with, or is connected with ELG, and the department has confirmed that there's no intention to obligate the commission to include the entirety of the asset retirement obligation funding deficiency outlined in the 2023 audit in the commission's 2025 fiscal year budget due to the effect on tipping rates it would have. It is expected that the FRSC will continue reporting these asset retirement obligations through its financial reporting and incrementally finance it through annual budgets. I know this is very complicated. Did the best I could to explain it. Andrew will further explain it.
Mark, thank you for that. And I would imagine that those of us sitting at the table want to know, the exact dollars and cents that it's going to mean to each of our communities as we move forward, because the impact of any new changes to the auditing and to what the province is asking of us is obviously going to have an impact. And it's just, as you say, we don't have an option. It's something that we are simply mandated once again to do. So would you like the floor open to questions, or did you want Andrew to go through? Okay, could I have a motion, please, to receive and file? Moved by Director Bedford, seconded by Director Doucette. On the question, Director Grant?
Ask a question. So again, it relates to the audited statements coming up. So I wasn't sure whether to ask it here or after Andrew speaks. But so Mark, you've identified a $6.9 million liability, but in the audited statements, I think there is a total figure of somewhere around 68 million. Andrew, and there are two figures in the audited statements. There's a $12.6 million figure, and there's a $14.8 million figure on page 67 of 68 of the kit. So I'm just a little confused in all these figures. So maybe the answer will come when Andrew speaks, but I don't know, maybe you can speak to that.
The simple number is that 6.9 million is the amount of the net liability that is unfunded. So on our statements, we estimate what our total liability is to close the site in the future. And then it's also based on what we've tipped. So you don't recognize the full expense. So related to that, because you don't recognize the expense all at one time, we capitalize the future value that's still available in each cell to the tangible capital assets. So when you're looking at the financial statements, intangible capital assets, well, Andrew's probably going to go through that anyway. The tangible capital assets have bumped up by the amount of the estimated future value in those cells. So when we take our obligation at the end of the year, less the net value of the asset retirement cost, those capitalized into the tangible capital assets, less what we got for money set aside, there's $6,973,000 we're missing in money if we were to fully fund it at this point in time.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
The unfunded part. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Director Grant. And Andrew? Did we not do that? Oh, yes, that was on the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carried unanimously. Andrew, welcome.
Thank you. My presentation may have changed a little bit in the last 5 minutes based on some of Mark's discussion, but I'll do my best to try to add to what Mark said. I made some copies of my speaking notes this morning because I thought some of the things we're going to talk about might be a bit complicated. And so I thought I'd pass these out if just you can follow along. It's just really just some bullet points that I'll address in the presentation. Thank you. So I'll start my presentation with sort of the standard audit spiel. We are the auditors for the Fundy Regional Service Commission, And our mandate is to come in at the end of the year when the financial records are closed off and perform a financial statement audit. And so that basically means two things. One is that we make sure there are no material errors in the financial statements, that the numbers are accurate. And the second part is to make sure that they're prepared in accordance with the proper standards. And Mark talked a lot about the public sector accounting standards. Accountants have done a bad job, I think, personally, in educating stakeholders in the public sector world in terms of what does public sector accounting standards mean versus how you actually operate and fund your various organizations. And the asset retirement obligation piece that just came in last year is another prime example of the accounting academics sort of throwing things out and then not doing a good communication plan to tell the stakeholders how things are going to affect them. But anyway, that's on the accountants. We need to do a better job going forward. End of rant. What I will say about our audit, based on the performance of our procedures and results, the conclusions we reached, we're expressing a clean audit opinion again this year. That can be found on page 1 of the financial statement package. I'll also say the accounting records continue to be of extremely high quality. We measure that by looking at the number of adjustments we need to make at the end of the year, if any, to correct the financial statement. And there were none, again, this year. We also found no evidence of any immaterial errors or other problems, and there was no evidence of fraud, theft, or errors, those sort of intentional problems that can come up from time to time. Our review of the internal control system showed no issues there. Things are working as they should. The organization has been around for a long time. We've been the auditors for a long time. And over the years, we have tweaked and made recommendations, but things are well controlled in terms of the financial records and accounting systems. In terms of the financial results, I'm going to talk a little bit about the public sector sort of statements that you see here, and then we'll talk a little bit about the funding model and where you ended up based on that, because I think from an operational standpoint, that's the more relevant figure. You need to understand sort of how each of the various sectors finished for the year. What is the impact going to be 2 years from now on your budget, and so on. So on page 3 of the package, we have the financial statement package, by the way, we have our statement of operations for the year. We ended up with a deficit of $358,000 compared to a budgeted deficit of $692. Sorry. You got to remember that the public sector statements, one of the key differences is that there is depreciation in here on your assets, right? That we don't account for in the funding model. And so we're generally going to see a budgeted deficit because of this depreciation calculation. So we actually beat our budget a little bit this year by $300,000. And there are a lot of reasons why that happened. It's hard to pin down to just one thing. There's probably a myriad of 10 or 15 different variances throughout the results that produce that better result overall. The other note that you see at the bottom of the page is the impact the implementation of the ARO had on the accumulated surplus. So there was a reduction at the beginning of 2023 of $7.2 million. That same gap, if you will, that Mark talked about is now down to 6.9 million, so it's dropped. And I think the main reason why it's gone down is some of the cost to cap have decreased. When Mark first put together the costing model on the cell capping, he was using historical data pre-2023. And I think it was $59 a square meter approximately is what it would cost to cap those cells. In 2023, there was a bunch more work done, and those costs actually dropped to $57. So if we project that out over the next 20, 30 years, as each of the future cells get capped, the liability decreases. And so that's why it's dropped from 7.2 down to 6.9. And if those costs continue to fall because of technology improvements or changes in regulations, the liability also decreases because we're paying less in the future. On page 5 of the financial statements, this is our statement of financial position, shows our net debt and our accumulated surplus number. There is a figure on here of $14.8 million for the asset retirement obligations, about the center of the page. This is one of the numbers I think that, Commissioner Grant was talking about. This is what I would call the present value. So in terms of today's dollars, of that future obligation. And there's a note in the back of the financial statements that talks about that future obligation of being $69 million. Well, that's what it will cost, 20, 30 years from now when the site closes. If we bring that back in terms of today's dollars, that liability, gross liability, is 14.8. That's comprised of what I would call 4 main categories, all right? There is the post-closure period, which is by far the largest. I think it's about 51% of that total is what we're projecting. And that's the cost to manage a site for the 40 years after it closes. So leachate management, monitoring gas wells, all that stuff. The second biggest one is cell capping. That's about 41 or 42%. The two of them combined are about 92% of that 14.8 million. And cell capping, of course, is putting the final cover on each of the cells as they close down and stop receiving waste. There is also a small amount in gas wells and a small amount in some building obligations that you're going to have when you close down and have to remove structures. But by far, post-closure and cell capping are the two key ones. So with the addition of that ARO liability, your net debt number has shot way up, of course. As we can see on this particular page, it's gone from 2.3 million to 14.9 million year over year, all driven by the addition of that new obligation. In the past, and on this statement, we can also see very clearly that in 2022, we had that post-closure liability in there for $2 million. I mean, it's gone from 2 million to 14 million, and people are saying, how does that happen? What's changed so dramatically? I think if you boil it down to a couple of things. One is that the accounting standards have really increased the scope of costs we now look at. And we're really not talking about adding expense here. We're not doing that. These costs were going to be incurred anyway, right? What we're simply doing is moving when we recognize them in the financial records from the future period into terms of today, okay? So we're, instead of having sort of a line of expense that goes like this as we get to the end, it's more smooth now because we brought those future costs back into today's financial picture. And that's what the 14.8 million represents. Any questions on that piece? Bit complicated. Okay. In terms of the funding model, we ended up the year with a net deficit of $79,000, which according to my crack team at the office, that's only 0.4% of the annual operating budget. So $19 million operating budget, I think it was roughly, and the $79,000 deficit. I think some of that, most of that is related to the solid waste component. There's a lot of moving parts in that. Before the meeting, we were talking with Mark, and it was, a heavy rainfall in November last year in December, which drives leachate management up costs through the roof. So some of the variables that impact the solid waste component are hard to predict and hard to budget, and based on a lot of factors that are outside the control of management. That budget, by the way, or that deficit of 79.6 will come into the 2025 operating budget. And you can find the details of that in note, I believe they're in note 16 on page 2025. I've made some references there if you wanted to look that up. The second bullet on that talking sort of breaks it down. There was a deficit in solid waste of about 96,000, and we had a couple of surpluses in community development and the public safety sector. During the year, there was 245,000 transferred to the reserves, and none were utilized. So at the end of December of 2023, we're sitting at $1,063,000 in future reserves. So that's a good financial asset to have in place. The last section of my notes here talk a little bit more about the ARO. So the first bullet talks about how these costs are not new. They're simply being shown and disclosed today. They were coming anyway. Cell capping always happened. Future liability to close the site down was always there. We're just recognizing them sooner rather than later. There's been a broadening of the scope of expenses, so that's why we see more. Talk a little bit about the two main components. And for budgeting purposes for 2023, we had put in 649,000, ended up at 665,000 in terms of measuring the increase in liability year over year. So pretty good. I will say that during our audit and looking at Mark's working papers and calculations that he did, there was a lot of work put into that, an extreme amount of work put into the formulation of this $14.8 million. And we got to remember that it's an estimate. There's a lot of things that that come into play when we calculate that figure that are going to happen in the future. So it's our best guess at this time. A lot of it's based on historical data, which may change or may not change. I mean, we saw how cell capping costs decreased by $2 a square meter just last year. So it's a best guess. There's a note in here, I think it's called measurement uncertainty, and maybe note 13, that talks about just that fact that, these numbers are our best guess at this point in time. Next year, they may be a bit different. But Mark did follow the standards to a T, and, all of the assumptions and estimates that were put in place were well supported and well backed up with either engineering data or historical accounting data. So as auditors, we feel this is a solid number at this point in time.
Thank you, Andrew, for the review of the financial statement. And also at this time, I'd like to thank Mark and the accounting team at the Fundy Regional Services Commission for all of their hard work and for having a clean audit. And certainly that speaks highly for the quality of work that has been done on this. So thank you. Does anyone have anything that they would like to contribute? Director Doucette.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for all your work, Mark, and your team. And Andrew, this is good. This was a good idea. Much easier to follow than scroll through that. So thank you for that, and appreciate your time. Thanks.
Okay. And it's been moved by Director Doucette to accept and approve the financial statements, seconded by Director Riddell. All those in favor? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you so much. Also, I would like a motion to, okay, Phil, we'll go to you first then. Go ahead.
This is just customary to reappoint our auditors for the 2024 fiscal year, and we are satisfied with the work of Teed Saunders Doyle. We've received a quote, we're happy with it, and it fits within our expectations. So there's a motion there to proceed with the reappointment of Teed Saunders Doyle for a 2024 audit.
Can I have a mover on that, please? Moved by Director Merrifield, seconded by Director Bedford. On the question, all those in favor? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on, we will go to item 6.5, the election of board officers. And as you will remember, we had come up with a new format for this, which is new to our region. So the procedure for the FRSC Executive Committee members is defined by Article 4.5.1 in the newly adopted FRSC procedural bylaw, which was adopted on May the 7th. This is a unique procedure and a made-in-Fundy region approach to election, which was unanimously approved by the FRSC board. So the new election procedure upholds the value of equity in executive roles within the commission. And we have checked with all of the communities that outlined as comprising the executive this coming year, and all have agreed to maintain their projected roles. And this is great news. And as a result, I have 3 resolutions that I will read off one at a time, seeking a mover and a seconder. And once we have done that, I will ask the board to vote on each resolution. So resolution number 1 is that the board appoint Mayor Jim Bedford as chairperson from May 24th, 2024 until May 22nd, 2025, or until the FRSC board elects a new chairperson. Also, that the board appoint Mayor Robert Doucette as vice chairperson from May 24th of 2024 until May 22nd of 2025, or until the FRSC board elects a new vice chairperson. And that the board appoint Mayor Libby O'Hara as chairperson from May 24th of 2024 until May 22nd of 2025, or unless the FRSC board elects a new chairperson. May I have a mover and a seconder, please?
So moved.
Moved by Director McKenzie. Oh, did I say pass? What did I say? Oh, did I? What's one little word? What's one little word? Darn, I got caught. So I will correct that, that I am elected as past chairperson. Thank you, everybody. So it's been moved by, pardon me? Yes, it was moved by Director McKenzie and it was seconded by, did we have a seconder at that point? Director Riddell. On the question, please vote now. All those in favor? I'm used to an electronic. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. And congratulations, Jim, on your new role as chairperson, and Director Doucette as your new role as vice chair. I wish you a good and prosperous year. And reports and presentations. Phil, are you? Okay. So we have the quarterly final financial update, and we'll go to Phil for that.
Through the chair to the members of the board, I'm not going to go through this line by line, but this is part of our controls that we have in place to monitor our spending. It is very early in the year, but we do it regardless. On our Q1 financial statements, we reviewed. There's nothing significant to report in terms of spending or expenditure controls that we see at this stage. But nevertheless, we have it there. It is of note that a lot of the provincial funding that we've accessed recently did not come into play in Q1, so you don't see those projections within our financial statements. And also, as you will remember, May 1st, we moved to circular materials, and that is also not identified because that is not in Q1. So everything else is there, is nothing to, that we have a belief that there's any requirement to adjust our budget or our projections for this year with the information we have. With that, it's a receive and file.
Thank you, Phil. May I have a motion to receive and file by Director Doucette, seconded by Director Bedford. On the question, all those in favor? Motion carried unanimously. Item number 7.2, Community Planning and Building Inspection Reserve. Phil, we'll go back to you.
Yeah, this is a first for me within the commission, and I'll really try to divide this conversation in two parts. One is the first motion, and the second will be a separate, almost a separate discussion. The first resolution is around rescinding a prior motion, and it's not something that I've done frequently, but we have discovered something that requires that type of action. So essentially it started when we had the last vote to release the $85,000 from local planning operating reserve to the fund, when it was discovered that the members voted in favor, which would have passed a simple majority resolution, but the two members that are recipients of the benefit of that service voted against. So a flag kind of came up on my shoulder and said, that doesn't seem right. I've got to look into that. So I dug into it, and it turns out it's a little bit more complicated than I thought it was. There's no explicit explanation of this within the legislation and regulations that I was able to find. But we came to the conclusion ultimately as staff after reviewing this that it's only right that for members who pay for a service exclusively, that it is their decision on where that money goes. If Hampton doesn't pay for a service, why should Hampton have a say at where it goes? So it was an oversight on our part after reflection. And the simplest way of resolving this is that we would rescind the motion, because as it stands now in our minutes, it indicates that the motion is passed, because it was identified, the voting threshold was identified as a simple majority. So the first motion calls to rescind it. Now, if you think of that, you go a little further. You say, okay, well, we created a reserve fund in the first place, which happened in December. So then you'd say, what do we do then? Did Rural District and Fundy St. Martin's vote against it at that time? Luckily for us, it was a unanimous vote in December. So we're going to interpret the creation of the reserve fund as a satisfactory, that it passed the satisfactory threshold, and that reserve fund is a legitimate reserve fund from the thresholds that are required. But for the release of the $85,000, it is a recommendation of this report to rescind it. It's motion one. So I'd ask if we can have that one voted on, and then I'll go to the second one.
Thank you, Phil. So the motion reads that the Fundy Regional Service Commission rescind the following resolution adopted by the Board of Directors on April 25th of 2024, that the Fundy Regional Service Commission transfer $85,000 from the Local Planning Service Operating Reserve to the Local Planning Services Operating Fund to support expenses associated with the office fit-up of 2030 Broadview Avenue. May I have a mover on that, please? Moved by Director Doucette, seconded by Director Grant. On the question, all those in favor? Motion carried unanimously. The motion, changed motion, is number 2, that the Fundy Regional Service Commission transfer $85,000 from the Local Planning Services Operating Reserve to the Local Planning Services Operating Fund to support expenses associated with the office fit-up of 2030 Broadview. And this requires a simple majority of commission members.
If I may, apologies. This next resolution and the next part of the report is exclusively for the Rural District and for Fundy St. Martin's. Because this is a service that's only financed through their 2 budgets. In this case, the majority would require a unanimous vote of just those 2 members. So for everybody else, I apologize. This is not something that you will be voting on. It's exclusive to them. So if I may, to the chair, if I could maybe just review that for the benefit of Director Riddell, as well as I guess, soon-to-be Chair Bedford. I will go through that, and then it will be up to those 2 members to either move and second and vote that particular resolution forward.
Is this weighted?
Sorry?
Is it a weighted vote?
No, a simple majority. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
So on this, I'll reestablish this for the 2 members for their consideration for this resolution. The $85,000 was initially transferred into the reserve fund in December because of access of a large amount of money from Department of Environment and Local Government for what we call the Planning Enhancement and Planning and Building Enhancement Program. So we are able to access a total of $455,000 for that. And what that basically did is that we started to apply that in the 2023 budget, which freed up this $85,000 that was eventually then transported into the reserve fund. So the funds, why I bring that up is because this $85,000 was not really taken from member fees from the 2 communities. It was really funds that we would have used otherwise, but because we got all these funds from the province, we used it against the revenue that was coming in through the membership fees. And then, of course, we're able to move a little bit quicker on some of the projects that have been delayed over the years because of that funding. So that's the first rationale. The second one is essentially that the rationale for investing into the retrofit of this office was that it should be spread across all departments. Those departments that share costs amongst all members, but also for the planning and building service. And the rationale for that is that the planning and building service will also specifically benefit from this service. 2 of the employees contemplated to sit into this office are from that team, the planning and building team that is financed. Also, it will be what we call a new customer-facing space for those seeking planning and building service. In the past, we do have visits to Cream Mountain related to planning and building. We do have staff present there, but we also, in our new office uptown, our temporary one, we have folks come in sometimes as well from across the region, from either St. Martin's, Fundy St. Martin's, or the rural district. They have plans. They want to connect with the planners or the building inspector. So this will be a new public-facing venue for that. So it is appropriate from a staff's perspective that the planning reserve is used to support the fit up, and we see good value in supporting that in this case. So with that, the resolution is that the Fundy Rural Regional Service Commission transfer the $85,000 that's in the reserve into the operating fund for the expenses associated with the office fit up, and it will require a unanimous vote of the 2 members in order for it to pass, because it's a simple majority and there's only 2, so you need 50% plus 1, so both would have to approve it in order for it to go through.
Thank you, Phil. Director Bedford, please.
Phil, I see where you're coming from, but unfortunately I can't support this. And the reason I can't support this is, if you remember back about 7 months ago, when we were looking for funding to support the rural community and the rural plan for Fundy St. Martin's, myself and our council sent a letter off to the Minister of Local Government seeking an extra $100,000 to go to the Regional Service Commission to support the plan and the rural plan for the rural community. And I believe that $100,000 was transferred to the RFC. So again, now we're looking at taking money out of that planning to put into the building. And like I say, I just can't support that, because say we have requested that letter. The money was granted by the local service government to the RSC for $100,000, and now we need another $85,000. So having said that, I can't support transferring that $85,000. Sorry, but can't do it.
Perhaps I can try to clarify the Fundy Regional Service Commission has received feedback from the rural district and from Fundy St. Martin's for years that there's been delays related to some of the longer term planning. And we certainly know that you have supported the access of those funds, and we've received an unprecedented amount of money outside of any other service that we receive, of $445,000. And that is to expedite the service and to provide enhanced service. And that is almost entirely to the exclusive benefit of the 2 members that are paying for it. So when you think of a CEO's role, and I could get myself into trouble focusing too much on 2 members versus 7 members, but that was something that I thought there was a venue for and that we could access for it. The funds in this $85,000 are funds that have been replaced by funding that we received by the province. It's not new funds. It's not your funds per se. It's funds that have been replaced by the province. The funds that we received from the province has used that. And in the budget document that we submitted to the board, which all members have received, we clearly articulated that these reserve funds were going to be used for the office fit up. It was stated, I can share the exact exact motion. So this was clarified. And now we have a new reality, which I shared, never expected, is that the office fit up costs more than expected. And we have that to face as a board. We had to decide how to face it. And the way we've had to face it is that we've had to go into different departments to finance that liability that we have to finance the fit up. And from the perspective of the CEO, The planning service is going to benefit from this. They should finance this to a certain extent, just like every other department. There are 2 employees part of it. If you choose not to, that is certainly your prerogative. It is certainly not my recommendation. It is not fair and equitable. I believe that some members choose to pay and others don't for services that are rendered within the new space that's provided. But that is your prerogative. I've placed it as a recommendation. I've also acknowledged that there was a mistake made by staff, that this should have been the exclusive responsibility of the 2 members to vote this in. It's not for the full board. So this is your opportunity to do it. We will move on without it. I do think it would be a mistake to do that, but I'll leave it to you to make that decision.
Any follow-up, either from Director Riddell or Director Bedford? Director Bedford's decision stands. The motion is defeated, yes. Item number 8, correspondence. I'm looking for a motion to receive and file the correspondence, please.
To refer to the Regional Facilities Committee, which is where this correspondence really belongs.
Sorry, could you please repeat that?
To refer to the Regional Facilities Committee. Are we talking about the correspondence from Regional Facilities, 8.1?
We're looking at all correspondence.
Well, 8.1 should be referred to the Regional Facilities.
So it's been moved by Director Grant that 8.1 be moved, be directed to the Regional Facilities Committee, and it's been seconded by Director Doucette. On the question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. Anything else on the correspondence? Would we have a motion, please, to receive and file the remaining correspondence? Moved by Director Merrifield, seconded by Director Doucette. On the question, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. New business, item number 9. Is there anything? Yes, going to the item that we added, pro-kids discussion, and I'll turn this over to CEO Willett.
Yeah, this is just an opportunity. There's been an email exchange on this, and we committed to putting this on the agenda, so I'll leave it to members to ask any questions that they may have for staff on this particular item that was discussed at a previous meeting, and we'll seek to provide clarity on any questions that are asked.
Thank you, CEO Willett. And again, this was a discussion item. It is not being taken upon this committee as an item to oversee. Simply for information, if anyone had anything further that they wanted to contribute, this is your opportunity. Okay, so we will move on to an adjournment. May I have a motion for adjournment, please? Director Riddell, seconded by Director Doucette. On the question, all those in favor? Aye. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you, Director McKenzie, for being with us virtually today. Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your week. And we are finishing at 10:57. I don't know where it goes.
Ready to go.
I think Megan has coffee off.
So I can, you can find it if it's all, okay. Do you want me to?
So I'm gonna have to go up now.
Okay.
She can get a big deal to it. I can follow her right there.
I did that in mine too.
Right. Just you mentioned $100,000 for a little thing to a little land. Big little things. After that, number of.